السلام عليكم.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. Can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum.
Yes. Okay, so we are live now. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nasalli ala rasulih al-Kareem. Amma ba'd. My respected brothers, elders, youngsters and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, today, as you know, we have been announcing for so many days about our live Zakat workshop and a session. Many brothers and sisters wanted to know and had this concern in regards to Zakat, and we are fortunate to have Mufti Daoud amongst us today, alhamdulillah. Keeping in mind, one of the main things in Islam about which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned, Bunya al-Islamu ala khamsin, that Islam, the pillars of Islam have been found on 5 main pillars. Amongst them, one main important pillar is the pillar of Zakat. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the starting of Quran, beginning Quran, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ. That those who give zakat for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And second place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that those people where Allah has given them the order of salah, Allah has also given the order of zakat also at the same time. أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ in Quran. أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. So zakat is very important, and many people, many brothers and sisters have this question that if I have a property, what to do on that zakat, if I have it for investment purposes, if I have my RRSP, RESP, and if I have my savings. So for all of your questions, inshallah, I would like to introduce our respected Mufti Daoud, mashallah, who has a master's degree, mashallah, in Islamic sciences and Islamic jurisprudence from Chicago, Madrasa in Chicago. He's also a graduate of Madrasatul Hasanain in Indianapolis, mashallah. And I have had many knowledgeable interactions with him, and I have taken a lot of benefit, and we have traveled a lot. Alhamdulillah, I was with him on a journey last year. I was fortunate to be with him on a very important session in Australia and many other countries. We have traveled together, alhamdulillah. Mufti Daoud, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, I couldn't fulfill the right of your introduction the way it's supposed to be, subhanallah, as it can be a long list. But mashallah, amongst one of your teachers, I believe it's also a Mufti Nadim Sahab from Chicago, right?
Yes, Mufti Yasir Nadim and Mufti
Yasir Nadim, mashallah, and many other teachers from whom you have benefited a lot, mashallah, and we can see that capability inside you, mashallah. And I just saw a zakat session you did a few days back. Alhamdulillah, we would like to thank you to give our community time. All from United States, you are giving time for us. Jazakallah khair. And without delaying, I would like you to start now, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair for that very, very heartfelt introduction. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. See, one of the, as Sheikh Nabil mentioned, one of the pillars of Islam is zakat. And many a times we have difficulty calculating our own zakat. And just as an individual is able to pray his salah without him having to ask questions every single day, and he's able to fulfill that faridah, he's able to fulfill that obligation, An individual should be able to fulfill the obligation of zakat without having to ask, without having to delve into the masail of zakat every single year, right? So you generally want to have the idea, just as an individual has an idea how to pray his salah, we want to have an idea of how to give zakat, right? And one of the purposes of this presentation is that we're able to calculate our own zakat, right? And we don't think it's something very complicated, right? People have an idea, people have the conception that zakat is very complicated. If we get a proper understanding of it, we aim through this presentation to be able to understand and calculate zakat on our own, inshallah. Right. First, let's start with the essential of zakat. Now, zakat linguistically is blessing, barakah, right? Purification, tahara, or tazkiyah, and praise, which is madh. So you're essentially looking at barakah, the meaning of purification, and the meaning of praise. Now, simply because its linguistic meaning is blessing or purification or praise, these meanings are also incorporated within the zakat that we give on by legal definition, meaning an individual who pays his zakat has barakah. An individual who's paying his zakat is essentially purifying his wealth, and then he goes on to deserve the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Now, legally speaking, by definition, zakat is a transfer of ownership of a portion of one's wealth to a deserving individual with its intention. Now, we need to keep in mind that every single word in this definition is very deliberate. Right? Every single word is there for a purpose. Now, for example, transfer of ownership. If an individual has a soup kitchen, right? He has a soup kitchen. What he does is that he feeds poor people. He cooks food, he feeds poor people. That's not transfer of ownership. There is permitted for them to come and eat from the food. There is as much as they want. However, there is no transfer of ownership. There's no transfer of assets, cash. There's no transfer of ownership over there. Similarly, if an individual gives a huge feast for all poor people, that's not transfer of ownership. So there has to be transfer of ownership of a portion of one's wealth. Now, that portion obviously is going to be determined based off of the zakatable assets an individual has. So a portion of one's wealth, we're looking at 2.5% of the zakatable assets an individual has to a deserving individual. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم. Right? He lists out the individuals who are deserving of zakat. Right? One example of that is an individual who's not a Muslim, an individual who's a kafir. They're not deserving of zakat. They may be deserving of certain types of sadaqah. That's possible. However, they're not deserving of zakat. With its intention, meaning if an individual gives sadaqah, right, at the beginning of Ramadan, you gave $500 sadaqah to the masjid. Now, your intention was sadaqah. When you handed that money over to the poor person or to whomever you wanted, your intention was sadaqah, it was not zakat. So when you're calculating your zakat later on, you can't add the $500 which you gave with the intention of sadaqah into your zakat and consider that as zakat, right? So it has to be from the inception itself. It has to be with the intention of zakat. Right? This is the general and the basic understanding of the definition of zakat. Now, obviously, the ruling of zakat is that it's fard. Just as salah is fard, it's fard to give zakat. And one shouldn't delay the fulfillment of zakat without a valid excuse. Right? Meaning that zakat became fard on me this year, but I haven't fulfilled it till 2 years later. That shouldn't happen unless there's a valid excuse for that. Right? Now that we know that what the definition of zakat is, let's look at the assets on which we have to give zakat. Right? Now, number one, cash is always zakatable. Right? Irrelevant of why you own the cash, whether it's for a noble purpose, whatever it is, cash will always be zakatable, right? If you have the cash in your savings account, if you have it in your 401k, if wherever you own cash, and whatever the intention that you're saving, whether you're saving up, whether it's for your basic needs, irrelevant of the intention, cash will always be zakatable, right? Number two is stocks. All right. Look at stocks. If you look at the last point, you have business inventory, right? Look at your stocks. You want to value your stocks and give zakat, you want to add the value of your stocks to your zakat calculation. Now 401k, generally what you have is there's two types of two areas in 401k. There's the vested amount and there's a the unvested amount. You don't want to calculate zakat in the unvested amount, right? The amount that is vested, that is owned by you, you're going to calculate it in your zakat. Gold and silver is always zakatable, right? Gold and silver is always zakatable. And gold and silver generally comes into question in relation to ladies, right? Gold and silver, whether you're wearing it, you're not wearing it, it's locked up, it's in your locker for the last 10 years, irrelevant of whether you're using it or you're not using it, or whatever your intention you own it for, gold and silver is always going to be zakatable. You calculate the value of gold and silver and you add it to your zakat, right? Now, resale properties. Now, there's a difference between a rental property and a resale property. A rental property is not considered zakatable, meaning if an individual has a rental property, he will not have to calculate the value of the property within his zakat, right? The cash that he receives from the rental property, if any cash is left at the end of the year, when zakat became obligatory upon him, if any cash is left at the end of the year, he'll calculate zakat on that cash. It's not that he'll have to add up whatever he earned throughout the year and then give zakat on that. No, whatever cash he has left at the end of the year from his rental property is zakatable. However, the property itself and the value of the property itself will not be calculated within his zakat. On the contrary, resale property is in a way your business inventory, right? So the value of the resale property is going to be calculated within one's zakat. Okay. Again, rental property is not a zakatable asset. Resale property is a zakatable asset, right? People who flip houses, whatever they do, if you bought a house with the intention of zakat, with the intention of selling it forward, that is a zakatable asset. Now, business inventory. Now, business inventory is anything an individual owns and he intends to sell it, right? So, for example, you have someone has they have a business of bottles, right? Of water bottles. Now, what they're going to consider the zakat on is everything that they're selling, right? You're going to consider your zakat on everything that you're selling. Okay, not the machinery and the things that you need to process the water bottles, right? Another example is an individual has a business of making tables. Now, he's going to only calculate the value of the inventory, meaning whatever he intends to sell. The machinery and the factory itself is not going to be considered when calculating zakat, right? This is a basic understanding of the zakatable assets that we need to consider when calculating our own zakat. Now, once an individual calculates his zakat, we also have to see what are the valid subtractions and what are invalid subtractions, right? Things that we can subtract when calculating our zakat, right? Valid subtractions is unpaid zakat. For instance, an individual owns $100,000 at the beginning of his new Islamic mark date, right? What you want to have is a mark date, a day on which you pay, zakat becomes fard on you every year. For instance, the 1st of Ramadan is your mark date, is your cutoff date. That's when you know that zakat becomes fard on me on the 1st of Ramadan. That's my Islamic cutoff date. Okay. Generally, your Islamic cutoff date is from the point that you earn nisab. We'll discuss nisab in a bit. From the point that zakat became obligatory on you, you earn nisab, and a year elapses on that. So for example's sake, let's just say you had $100,000 when zakat became obligatory on you, the 1st of Ramadan. However, before calculating 2.5% of 100,000, you also have to see if you had any zakat left from the previous year. So if an individual's zakat the previous year was $5,000 and he didn't pay that zakat, so when calculating zakat from this $100,000 this year, he'll first subtract whatever he's owed in zakat, which is now $95,000, and then he'll calculate the 2.5% from his $95,000. Now let's go ahead. Take the same exact example. He took out $5,000 because he owed the $5,000 in zakat from the previous years. Now his valid subtractions don't stop there. He's also owed certain debts. He owes certain debts to individuals or to certain institutions. If he owes certain debts, we're looking at the debts that are due within the year. And examples of debts that are due within the year or your mortgage payments, right? Whatever you have to pay, you're due to pay within the upcoming year is going to be a valid subtraction from your zakat. For instance, an individual pays $10,000 for his house mortgage. Example, right? An individual pays $10,000 on his house mortgage every single year. Now that $10,000 is his principal amount, not interest amount. Regardless, the discussion of whether it's permissible to enter in an interest-bearing transaction or not is a separate discussion altogether. We know that it's impermissible to enter in a interest-bearing transaction. However, if an individual has already incurred such an expense, he has already entered in a transaction, we don't say that those expenses are invalid, right? What we will consider in your mortgage payment is that hopefully you're going through an Islamic bank. If you go through an Islamic bank, you generally don't have to differentiate between what is the interest amount, because the entire is going to be considered the principal amount. So if you owe $10,000 of principal amount, not interest amount, principal amount, you're going to subtract that from your zakat calculation. So you went from $100,000, you had $5,000 of zakat due from previous years. Next, you have $10,000 due on your mortgage payments this year from the principal amount. Again, not interest, principal amount. Third, now when you're calculating your zakat, what you do is that you subtract the $5,000 that is due in zakat. You also subtract the $10,000 that is due in your mortgage payments. Right? That's a valid debt, and you're only going to calculate the amount that is due in a year. Otherwise, no one would pay zakat, right? You're only calculating the amount that is due in a year. So you went from $100,000 to 95 to 85. Now you're going to calculate your zakat, meaning 2.5% of your $85,000 now. Now let's move to the next valid subtraction. Next valid subtraction is incurred expenses, right? There's incurred expenses, and as you see in the next part, there's potential expenses. Incurred expenses is, for example, the amount that you're due on your credit card, right? That's an incurred expense. An incurred expenses, you bought a car, you owe the individual, you owe the individual $5,000, right? You bought a used car, you owe the individual $5,000. That's an incurred expense, right? Now, taxes, for instance, can be incurred or potential. If tax becomes due, it's an incurred expense. If it's not due, then it's a potential expense. You'll subtract the tax that is due from the total zakatable assets, and you won't subtract the tax that is not due, right? That's potentially going to become due. Okay. Now, invalid subtractions are savings. Now, although what we've mentioned here is savings for noble purposes, right? That's because of the general question that we receive is, I'm saving up so that I can build a madrasa. I'm saving up so I can build a school. I'm saving up so I can give to the masjid $5,000 at the end of the year. As long as, again, as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, as long as an individual has cash, irrelevant of his intention, whether he's saving for himself, whether he has it for his personal usage, whether he has it because he wants to give it eventually to a poor person, or he wants to eventually give it to the masjid, he wants to eventually save up so he can buy a house, all of these intentions are irrelevant. The fact that an individual owns cash is sufficient. So long as you own cash, you will calculate zakat on it. Okay. Now, another form of invalid subtractions is potential expenses. Right? You know, for instance, that you have to buy a car. You don't have a car at the beginning of the year. You know you have to buy a car. You've saved up $50,000, and you want to buy a car for $10,000. You cannot subtract the $10,000 that you intend to buy a car with and then calculate your zakat. Why? Because that's a potential expense. You want to do it. You haven't incurred the expense yet, right? Next is, after we've discussed zakatable assets and valid subtractions and invalid subtractions. Let's move on to individuals who are liable to give zakat. Okay. Now, individuals who are liable to give zakat, obviously, we're considering all sane adults, Muslims. Right? If a child, ma'adallah, may Allah protect us all, if the father of a child passes away and he leaves abundant wealth for the child will not have to pay zakat on that until he becomes baligh. Now, possession of nisab. Nisab, there's a difference of opinion here. There's the gold standard and there's silver standard. Now, what we can take is the gold standard. Generally, silver standard is much lower, is impractical in certain scenarios. So if you really want to get into the details of why we prefer gold standard over silver standard, you can look into the American fiqh, the resolution on gold standard of zakat in the American Fiqh Academy, inshallah. You can read up on that and see why we prefer gold over silver. Now, certain scholars hold the opinion of silver standard. That's a valid opinion within the madhab. Right? Now, possession of nisab is 87.48 grams of gold, meaning the value of that. If an individual his zakatable assets add up to the value of 87.48 grams of gold, then that's what we're going to consider. Now, we're looking at the value of 87.48 grams of gold on the night zakat became fard on you, meaning an individual had $100,000 at the beginning of the year, right? Or let's just say he had not 100,000, he had $3,000 at the beginning of the year. And at the end of the year, so let's assume that at the beginning, the zakatable assets, the 87.48 grams of gold, values around, for instance, $3,000, right? 87.48 grams of gold values around $3,000, right? Presumably. Now, this individual owns $3,000 or $3,500 at the beginning of the year. At the end of the year, he owns again $3,500 at the end of the year now. From the 1st of Ramadan last year till the 1st of Ramadan this year, he owns $3,500. And the value of 87.48 grams of gold is 3,000, and he owns 3,500. Is he over the nisab? Yes, he's over the nisab. If he doesn't have any other valid subtractions, will he have to pay zakat? He'll have to pay zakat. Okay. Fluctuations during the year are ignored. Now let's take the same exact example. He had $3,500 at the beginning of the year, and he has $3,500 at the end of the year, which is from 1st of Ramadan till the next Ramadan, till 1st of Ramadan. Now, during the year, what happened is he spent that money. All right. He spent $500 on buying a camera. He spent another $1,000 to buy certain basic needs that he had. Now, what you're noticing is that he didn't have $3,500 throughout the year. That amount may have gone below the nisab point. He may have or he may have gotten a lot more. For instance, he had 3,500 in the beginning of the year. And during Muharram time, in the middle of the year, during Muharram time, he got $5,000, right? He doesn't have 3,500 anymore. He has 5,000. But at the end of the year, which is the 1st of Ramadan that we put as the cutoff date, at the end of Ramadan, he didn't have 5,000. He went back to 3,500. So that fluctuation is not going to be considered when calculating zakat. Whatever you have on the cutoff date is what we're going to calculate zakat on. Right? The only time we're going to consider we're going to have a restart, right? We're going to start all over again, is if an individual loses everything they have, meaning they have $0. They have nothing that they own. At that point, we're going to restart again. Okay, that is going to take him out of the category of zakat, and zakat is no longer fard on him. Now, the next point is liability is not contingent on liquidity. Now, most people have the question that I don't have cash, right? Right. This question, it'll be practical if we take the example of women who don't work, women who don't work, for example. It's a very common question in the Muslim Desi community. Women who don't work, but they own a lot of gold, right? They don't work, right? They're housewives, but they own they own a lot of gold. Now, the question is, I don't own any cash. Do I have to give zakat? Right? So an individual does not have to have liquid assets in order for zakat to become fard on him or her. Right? A lady can have gold worth $10,000 and have zero in her bank account. Zakat will still be fard on her. Why? Because gold is a zakatable asset, and she has $10,000 worth of gold. Therefore, she has to calculate zakat on $10,000, 2.5% of $10,000. She doesn't need to have cash. Or an individual has business inventory, meaning he owns 5 houses. Okay? He owns 5 resale houses that he intends on selling. Now, he's going to look at the value of these houses. Now, let's just say the value, each house $100,000. The value of these houses is $500,000. However, in his bank, he only has $100. Will he calculate zakat? Yes. How much? On 500 and 100, $500,000 of zakatable assets and $100 in his bank account. All of that is zakatable. We won't look at the liquid assets, meaning cash, that he has in his bank account. We won't only look at the liquid assets. We'll consider all zakatable assets, irrelevant of whether they're liquid or illiquid. Okay. Now, this is an individual we discussed an individual who's liable to give zakat. Now, we have to look at an individual who's eligible to receive zakat. First and foremost, we need to consider the fact that an individual may be in the middle, meaning he's not liable to give zakat and he's not eligible to receive zakat either. Right? So that's possible. How? An individual, for example, he has his basic assets, meaning he has his house that he lives in, that's not zakatable. So let's look at 2 things. You have your things that you use that are for personal usage, and things that are business inventory, that are for business, right? Whether it's business inventory, whether it's your 401k, your stocks, all of those things that are not personal assets, they're meant for business. Now, in personal assets, you have 2 types. You have basic needs, and then things that are in excess of your basic needs. Your basic needs include your house, your clothing, your car that you have, right? Things that you use every single day or every now and then, right? These are your basic needs. You don't consider the value of your personal items, period. Whether they're for your basic needs or they're not for your basic needs. An example of that is an individual owns 3 houses. Now, one house he lives in, the second house is his vacation home in, I'm from America, so I'll take Florida, right? Is his vacation home in Florida. And his third house is also another vacation home that he has in California. Now, is he going to consider the value of his vacation homes when giving zakat? No. Is he going to consider the value of his vacation homes when receiving zakat? Yes. So when receiving zakat, his vacation homes are considered things that are beyond his basic needs. Therefore, he's not eligible to receive zakat. Why? Because the assets that he owns beyond his basic needs are more than the zakat value, more than the value of 87.48 grams of gold. Okay. So this individual is neither liable to give zakat nor eligible to receive zakat. Okay. Second point is it connects back to the first point, which is nisab calculation includes all item beyond essential needs. Right. So when you're giving zakat, you're not going to take your house, you're not going to take your car in. The basic things that an individual uses that he has for his personal usage are not going to be considered when calculating your zakat. Therefore, if you have $100,000 in your bank account and your house is worth $500,000, you're not going to calculate zakat on $600,000. You're calculating zakat only on $100,000. Your house is a personal item that's considered an essential need. Your car, it could be you can have the most expensive car you want. Your car is going to be considered an essential need. Okay, I can have a car worth $10,000. I can have a car worth $100,000. My car is going to be considered an essential need, and I'm not going to consider the value of my car when calculating zakat. Right? Again, the next point is the lack of liquid assets is not a valid criterion. We said that it's possible for an individual to have only illiquid assets, meaning he has no cash, but he has a very large business inventory, right? He sells cell phones, right? He sells phones. Now his business inventory is worth $500,000. However, he has no cash. Almost, for example's sake, he has no cash in his account, in his bank account. Is he liable to give zakat? Yes. Is he eligible to receive zakat? No. The next is individuals who are eligible to receive zakat, right? Eligible recipients. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, eligible recipients are going to be in two categories here. Recipients who are still valid and recipients who are generally invalid at this point because of the circumstances or the time that we live in. Examples of individuals who are eligible to receive zakat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ. There's a faqir, there's miskeen, right? The difference between a faqir is a faqir, an indigent person, and then there's miskeen. A faqir owns certain amount of money. He owns zakatable assets. Okay? He has some money. However, that money doesn't add up to nisab amount. It doesn't add up to be at the value of 87.48 grams of gold. Okay? That's a faqir. A miskeen is an individual who owns nothing. Okay? So they're both in the same category. A debtor is an individual who, for example, an individual has $5,000. However, an individual has $5,000. However, he owes $20,000. Can he receive zakat? He can receive zakat. Why? Because his zakatable assets are $5,000. But his debt, which is a valid subtraction, is encompassed. Not only is it encompassing his zakatable assets, is going beyond his zakatable assets. So can he receive zakat? He can receive zakat. Now, a wayfarer who is wealthy in their homeland but poor on their journey. For instance, an individual he's traveling. Right? He goes, he wants to go to some exotic country. Let's just say he goes to travel. I don't want to offend anyone. He goes to travel to a country where it's not very safe. Now, while he's there, someone robs him. He no longer has his passport. He no longer has his wallet. He doesn't have anything that he had. Now, is it permissible? And he has no access to the money that he has back home. He's a rich individual, right? He has many assets. However, he has no access to his money anymore. Why? Because he was robbed. Is it permissible for him to receive zakat so that he can get by, perhaps go back to his home or go through his journey? It's permissible for him to receive zakat. A Muslim soldier who is cut off from his troops. Why? Because they have no means of obtaining or accessing goods and money that they would otherwise gain when they were in the troop. Right? These are valid recipients. Now, inapplicable recipients are official zakat collectors of the Muslim state. We don't have that anymore. Right? We don't have people who are officially appointed by Muslim states to collect zakat from the people. A slave working towards freedom, we no longer have slavery, therefore an inapplicable recipient. Those whose hearts are to be reconciled. وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam during his time gave zakat money. He gave money to individuals in order to keep them connected to Islam. Is that applicable today? No. It hasn't been applicable from the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. Ineligible recipients. Now, keep in mind, ineligible recipients may be because of circumstances again, or maybe because of who they are as individuals. One example is ascendant and descendant. One example is your relatives, ascendants and descendants. Ascendants is for your parents, your grandparents, and just keep going forward. Right? Descendants are your children, your grandchildren, and you just keep going down. Ascendants and descendants. However, these individuals may be eligible to receive zakat, just not from you though. They may be poor. They may be eligible to receive zakat. However, you cannot give your zakat to them. A spouse, meaning a husband, can't give zakat to his wife. A wife can't give zakat to her husband. A Hashimi, meaning a person who is from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And many a times it's sad to see that these individuals who are Hashimi, meaning from the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are deserving, right? Are deserving of zakat, meaning in the sense that they're very poor. They need help. We should go out of our way to help them through other means, right? We can't give them zakat, so we should collect money, right, to help the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not with the intention of zakat. Okay, a non-Muslim is not an eligible recipient. Right? Organizations and masajid are not eligible recipients. Right? Which one shouldn't get the misconception that you can't give your zakat to a trusted organization. What we mean by the idea that they're ineligible recipients is that an organization can't consume zakat money. An organization cannot consume zakat money. Masjid cannot consume zakat money, right? When you give zakat to the masjid, they're simply acting as the mediator. They take your money and they give it to people who are eligible to receive zakat. The organizations that you, hopefully trustworthy organizations, the organization cannot use zakat money for their own expenses, whether it's for employees, whether it's for any other expense that they have, right? Employees or any other expense. The organization itself cannot consume zakat money. However, they can act as a mediator to take your zakat money and pass it on to the individual who is deserving. Right? That's permissible. Consuming the money is not permissible. Zakat money is not permissible. Okay. Right. At this point, we have some applicable scenarios. Now, we're assuming that nisab is at $500. Keep in mind, nisab is, by gold standards, 87.48 grams of gold. Now, we're assuming nisab is $500. Now, Zaid has $499 in his bank, a house worth $100,000, and a car worth $10,000. Is he liable to pay zakat? And if yes, how much is he going to pay? If no, is he eligible to receive zakat? Now, keep in mind, we're looking at zakatable assets and we're looking at valid subtractions. What are his zakatable assets? Okay. First of all, he has $499 in his bank. That's cash. Is cash zakatable? Cash is zakatable. Next is he has $100,000 worth, a house worth $100,000. However, he lives in that house. It's his personal house. So is that zakatable? No. Why? It's considered an essential need, personal item. He has a car worth $10,000. However, it's his personal car. Is that zakatable? Given that his car is a personal car, it's not going to be zakatable. Is it an extra car that he doesn't use? An exotic cars that he just collects? No, it's his personal car. So are we going to calculate that? Well, when in our zakat, we're not going to calculate that in our zakat. So far, he only has $499 of zakat worth of zakatable assets. How much is nisab? We're assuming nisab is $500. Is he liable to give zakat? No. Is he eligible to receive zakat? Yes. Right? He's eligible to receive zakat. Why? He's going to fall under the category of faqir, meaning by definition, right? You don't call him a faqir. By definition, he doesn't meet the criterion of nisab. He doesn't meet the threshold of nisab, which is in this scenario, for example's sake, $500. Next example, Zaid has $100 in his bank, a house worth $100,000, and 2 vacation properties, each worth $50,000. Is he liable for zakat? And if yes, how much? If no, is he eligible for receiving zakat? Now we have 2 scenarios. One scenario, but we have more than one, perhaps more than one zakatable asset, right? Why? We're looking at $100 in his bank. Is that cash? Is that zakatable? Yes. And the question that would generally pop up in people's mind here is he has 2 additional properties worth $50,000. One would think that these are zakatable. Why? Because they're vacation properties. However, we mentioned earlier that vacation properties are not resale properties. Only resale properties are zakatable. Vacation properties are considered personal items. They're not essential needs. Right? We divided personal items into 2 parts. Things that are considered essential needs and things that are not considered essential needs. The car that you use is an essential need. The exotic car collection that you have is not an essential need. The house that you live in is an essential need. The 2 vacation homes that you have are not essential need, right? So in this scenario, he has a house worth $100,000 and 2 vacation properties, which add up to $100,000, $50,000 and $50,000. So he has personal items worth $200,000. $100,000 is his essential needs, meaning the house that he lives in, and $100,000 is not his essential needs. Does he have to give zakat? Now, when giving zakat, what are we looking at? We're looking at zakatable assets. Zaid has $100 in his bank. Only the cash is zakatable. His personal items, whether for essential needs or not, are not zakatable. Okay. So is he liable to give zakat? No. Is he eligible to receive zakat? Okay, now let's look at, does he have things beyond his basic needs? He does. What are the things that he has beyond his basic needs? He has 2 vacation properties worth $100,000. So when receiving zakat, we're looking at the value of things that go beyond one's essential needs, which is in this scenario 2 vacation homes. Therefore, he neither has to give zakat nor can he receive zakat. Okay. Next scenario, Zaid has $10,000 in the bank, a factory property worth $100,000, machinery worth $50,000, and inventory worth $5,000. How much zakat should he pay? Let's look at the zakatable assets that he has. Cash is zakatable. Okay, so he has $10,000. He has to calculate zakat on $10,000. That's his first zakatable asset, liquid asset. A factory worth $100,000. We said that when an individual has a business inventory, the factory and the machinery is not considered when calculating zakat. Okay. The only thing we're considering as business inventory are the things that he sells. He's not selling his factory. He's not selling his machinery. He's using the factory. He's using the machinery to create business inventory. The only thing that he's selling is his business inventory. So his factory worth $100,000 is not zakatable. His machinery worth $50,000 is not zakatable. However, his inventory worth $5,000 is zakatable. Therefore, how much zakat does he have to pay? He has to pay $10,000 in the bag and $5,000 worth of business inventory. So he's paying 2.5% of $15,000. Okay. Next scenario, right? Zaid has $10,000 in the bank. Is that zakatable? Yes. $5,000 in his 401k. $2,500 contributed by him and $2,500 as the company match. There's $1,000 fine to withdraw from the 401k at this time. How much zakat should he pay if the 401k is vested and if the 401k is unvested? So we have two scenarios. We have to do two separate calculations. Okay, first he has $10,000, which is zakatable, cash. That's simple and easy. Cash is zakatable. Now, $5,000 is divided into two parts. We mentioned that in 401k, the amount that is vested is going to be considered. The amount that is vested is going to be considered zakatable. The unvested amount is not zakatable. So let's go with the first scenario, where the entire amount, meaning the 2,500 that he gave, that went from him, and the 2,500 that came from the company, all of it is vested. Right? All of it is in technically, in more simplistic terms, all of it is in his ownership now. Now, what are we looking at? $10,000 worth of zakatable assets plus $5,000, which is $15,000. Now, machinery worth $20,000. We mentioned earlier that machinery is not business inventory. It's used to create business inventory. Therefore, the machinery is not zakatable. So the $20,000 is not zakatable. Machinery worth $20,000 is not zakatable. His business inventory is $2,500. His business inventory is worth $2,500. Now he has $10,000 of cash, $5,000 of, in this scenario, in the first scenario, of vested in his 401k, and $2,500. Okay, so what he has to do is add up 10,000 plus 5,000, 15, and then $17,500 of zakatable assets. Okay, now we mentioned earlier that there are valid subtractions. What we have to consider here is there is a $1,000 fine to withdraw from the 401k at this time. Is that a valid expense? Meaning he has $17,500 and $17,500 worth of zakatable assets. Is this $1,000 withdrawal fine, is this going to be considered a valid subtraction? The answer for that is no. Why? Because this is not a incurred expense. This is a potential expense. So long as the 401k remains in the account, he's not going to be charged any fine. Therefore, this $1,000 is not a incurred expense. It's a potential expense. And we mentioned that incurred expenses are going to be considered valid subtractions, and potential expenses are invalid subtractions. We cannot consider potential expenses. Therefore, this $1,000 fine that he would be fined, right? These $1,000 that he would be fined if he were to withdraw from his 401k is not considered at all. So he has to pay 2.5% of 17,500. This is the first scenario. Second scenario is, what if his 401k is unvested? Meaning he has $10,000 of cash. Now, that's plain and simple. Now, his 401k is divided in two. 2,500, which was contributed by him, that's always going to be vested. However, the company match, which is 2,500, is unvested. So when the amount that is unvested in your 401k is not considered, it's not zakatable. Why? In technical terms, it's not owned by you. So when calculating zakat, we're looking at $10,000 and $2,500 contributed by him. Why? Because only $2,500 is vested. And the $2,500 that is unvested is out of the picture now. And then we also have $2,500 worth of business inventory. Therefore, he's calculating in the second scenario, what if it is unvested? Second scenario, he's calculating his zakat from $10,000 plus 25 and 25. That's $15,000. So 2.5% of $15,000. Next scenario, right? Zaid has 400 in the bank and his wife has 40,000 in gold and silver. How much zakat should he pay? The answer for that is he doesn't have to pay zakat. If anything, he can receive zakat. Keep in mind, zakat is a individual obligation. Zaid is responsible for his zakat, and his wife, as an individual, is responsible for her zakat. Just as Zayd has to pay his own salah, meaning salah is fard on Zayd as an individual, and his wife as an individual. Similarly, zakat is fard on Zayd as an individual and his wife as a separate individual. Now, if Zayd wants to pay for his wife, can he? Sure. But in technical terms, in reality, there is no zakat fard on Zayd. And his wife has to pay 2.5% of $40,000. Right? That's how much zakat is fard on her. Right? Next is Zainab has $10,000 in the bank. Gold that she wears, 50,000, and silver that she does not wear, worth 500, and diamonds worth 30,000. How much zakat should she pay? Keep in mind that this is all for personal usage. These are all personal items. None of this is business inventory, meaning she doesn't do a diamonds business. These are all diamonds that she owns, and they're for her personally. Now let's look at the zakatable assets. $10,000 in the bank, $50,000 of gold, and $500 of silver that she does not wear. Keep in mind, we said whether an individual wears the gold, uses the gold or not, it's always zakatable. Therefore, 10,000 plus 50,000, which is $60,500 so far. Now let's look at the diamonds worth $30,000. Diamonds are not zakatable. Precious metals besides gold and silver are not zakatable. Therefore, these diamonds are not, you don't have to pay zakat on she doesn't have to pay zakat on these diamonds, although they're worth $30,000. So we're looking at 2.5% of $60,500. Any questions? Before any questions, I want to mention one point, is that if an individual buys something with the intention of personal usage, right? For instance, they bought a house, they had a vacation home, that's personal. Now they intend on selling it now. Simply having the intention to sell it will not turn it into business inventory. Only when the individual puts it on sale will it become business inventory. Okay. That's any questions? I think we'll suffice with that. If anyone has any questions, then I think we'll share here. Yes.
Jazakallah khair, Maulana. That was a very thorough presentation you did, and it answered a lot of questions for many people already, mashallah, the way you did this presentation, subhanallah. So I'm going to read you some questions, Maulana. Question number one we have. Okay, Assalamu alaikum from Brother Q Malik. Respected brothers and sisters, if you have any. Okay, they're asking, stocks, is zakat owed on market value or book value?
You want to go with the market value of the stock. The night zakat became fard on you. So you're looking at, if your cutoff date is, for simplistic reasons, your cutoff date is first of Ramadan, and Sha'ban was 30 days. You're looking at the value of stocks on the 29th or the 30th at the time of Maghrib. Okay. The stock markets generally close before that, so you're good. And one other question that people generally ask in relation to stocks is, do we have to pay zakat on volatile stocks? You do have to pay zakat on volatile stocks. And you're looking at the value of the stock, market value, at the time zakat became fard on you, which is the Maghrib time of 29th or the 30th of Sha'ban. If first is your cutoff date. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, Jazakallah, Maulana. See, Maulana, there are certain families which are hand to mouth, like they have this hand to mouth situation, and obviously whatever salary they earn, it goes in their monthly expenses. So one brother is asking a question regarding gold, that if she has just gold and no cash, where is she going to get money, cash from, or does she have to sell the gold to give zakat?
So what what you have to consider is irrelevant of the zakatable assets, irrelevant of their liquidity, they're still zakatable assets, right? I can't say that my business inventory is worth $50,000. However, the market is very bad right now. My business inventory, although it's not liquid, meaning I don't have any cash at hand, is still zakatable. Similarly is gold and silver. Women sometimes own, mashallah, a lot of gold and silver. We have to consider that the fact that you have that much, something worth that much, right? We have to first just recognize that I have something worth $50,000. I have something worth $10,000. Right? That should help, right? And yes, she will have to find a way to either liquidate her gold and give zakat, or she'll add up and then pay when she gets cash. So add up for this year and then the next year and pay when she gets cash.
Okay, so another thing, Maana, for zakat, someone's asking another question. Can you give zakat directly to family? It means brother, sister, son, or daughter who are poor.
So you want to, when looking at recipients within your family, you want to subtract everyone who is, take out of the picture anyone who's above and anyone who's below. Meaning you can give zakat to you cannot give zakat to your parents, you cannot to your grandparents, and onwards. Above. Below, your children, your grandchildren. Sideways, you can give zakat. You can give to your spouse, you can give to your siblings. You can give to your sister, your brother, onwards, your cousins, your aunts, and onwards. So sideways, you can give. Right above and right below you cannot give. Ascendants and descendants, you cannot give.
Okay, and many Maulana see, for example, let's say I'm giving zakat to my brother, or someone's giving zakat to their brother who's in need. And obviously in our culture, people mind when we give them zakat money. Do we have to mention to them that this is zakat money, or we don't have to mention, and Allah knows our intention? We'll just say, this money is for you to use it for yourself, just use it.
Yeah, so look at it this way, right? Intention is an action of the heart, not an action of the tongue. So just as an individual does not have to explicitly mention which salah he's praying by tongue, he can have it within his heart. The amount that he's taking out for sadaqah or for zakat is going to be within his heart. So he doesn't have to explicitly enunciate the fact that this is for zakat.
Okay. And another question by Brother Mustafa Ali. He's asking, if I have booked a house on April 1st, for example, and closing is May 31st, I have down payment in my account that will be paid on May 31st. Is this zakatable?
Can you clarify the question one more time?
Okay, so someone is buying a house, let's say on January 1st, and the closing of the house is April 1st. And so the down payment, which they have to give, let's say $30,000, $40,000, the down payment, he's asking, do I have to give zakat on that down payment, which I have to give for the house?
Look at it this way, right? Your closing is, when is something considered an incurred expense, right? You want to differentiate between incurred expense and potential expense. When I buy my phone, for instance, I bought the phone, it's in my ownership now. Once it's come into my ownership, I owe the individual money. Now that's an incurred expense. But what I can't say is that, I'll buy the phone from you on that date. Why? Because I get my paycheck on the 1st of the next month. Now that's a promise of sale. It's not an incurred expense. It's a potential expense. Therefore, if he's going to close the house in a few days, that's a potential expense. Therefore, we're not going to subtract that. That's not a valid subtraction. And if he has cash, then yes, that cash is zakatable.
Okay.
And you said something about mortgage or something?
No, nothing related to mortgage.
Okay.
So another question we have, Mana, from Mahalabi. If vacation property is sold, so is it zakatable immediately after it's sold, or do they have to wait 1 year on the on the money?
No. This is a very general question, right? People think that, once I receive cash, then I wait 1 year for that cash. And this question generally comes when there's large amounts of cash or gold. You're looking at your cutoff date for the beginning at the end of the year. People who don't have a cutoff date, or they don't know their cutoff date, they should make an estimation, right? You should always have a cutoff date. And the cutoff date is by the lunar year, not the solar year, not like the 1st of April. You're looking at the 1st of Sha'ban, 1st of Ramadan, right? That's one. If you don't know your cutoff date, then you want to estimate. If you can't come up with an estimation, then you simply set a cutoff date and follow it onwards. That's first. Now, the question that you brought up is cash. We're simply looking anything zakatable, right? We're looking at the beginning of the year of your zakatable year and the end of the zakatable year, and we're holding on to the 1st of Ramadan just for sake of example. So if she has cash at the end of Ramadan, at the end of Sha'ban, that's zakatable. Now, vacation property, right? Vacation property is for personal usage. What you don't want is the vacation. What you're going to consider is that something which is in your personal usage. When does it turn into business inventory? The only time it turns into business inventory is when some action is involved. Right? The simple intention of this is, this phone, now I want to sell it. That intention won't turn it into business inventory. When I put it on sale, right, and I start getting offers, now that's a business inventory. So the moment the house was put on sale on the market and you started receiving offers, that's considered an action that explicitly makes it business inventory. So from that point onwards, your house is zakatable. That house is business inventory. That's a resale property, and it's zakatable. And now if the property is already sold, then you're looking at the cash that you have at hand.
Okay, mashallah. That explains it very well, mashallah. I think there is another question, Maulana. Someone needs to know if a brother owns a car showroom in which he has many cars, and most of these cars are also financed or they're on loan. So basically, they're not his property. So how will he give zakat on it once he sells the cars, whatever commission he makes or the amount he makes, or are they considered as property and he has to pay the zakat value on the entire all the vehicles he has?
So he financed all those cars. He owns all of the cars, right?
Well,
so you're
basically he owns it. Yeah, but he's financing those cars also, and then obviously when he sells those cars, people are going to finance those cars also from him.
So let's keep the consumer's interests out of this, right? Let's look at him as an individual. How people will obtain the car from him is irrelevant to us. We're looking at him. What does he have? He owns, for instance, 100 cars, and somehow he financed 100 cars, right? So the value of the 100 cars, let's say 10, is it values around $50,000, $500,000. However, whatever he owes on every single car for the next year, just like you consider what you're owning for what you owe on your house for mortgage for the next year, you're going to subtract that. So let's just say he financed cars worth $500,000, and in mortgage he owes the company, the financial institution, he owes them $100,000 this year. Therefore, he's going to subtract $100,000 before calculating. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay, another 1 second. Okay, Mona, another question we have. Let's say a child who's not baligh and he owns a lot of property and a lot of wealth, and he inherits it or parents give it to him. And let's see the day he turns baligh Islamically, how would he pay zakat? Like, would he have to wait for 1 year to pass on to his assets, or he has to give zakat for previous mal also? When does the eligibility criteria start?
So essentially, zakat will apply to him once he becomes baligh. Just as he doesn't have to make up the salawat that he missed before, right? So he won't have to pay for the zakat that he didn't pay before. Why? It was never obligatory on him to begin with. So he's considering from the point he became baligh, a year has to pass, a lunar year has to pass, and then he'll have to pay zakat. And that will be his cutoff.
Okay. And another question from Brother Ali. I booked an apartment and the apartment will be built in 5 years. I'm paying installment for another 5 years. Do I need to pay zakat every year on the apartment to the value of the total installment?
He rented the apartment, you said?
No, he has booked an apartment on installments, and it's a 5-year installment, and he will have to pay monthly installments in order for the apartment to be in his possession after 5 years. So he's asking the current value of the apartment every year. Let's say he bought the apartment for $20,000. He will have to pay monthly installments for 5 years in order to pay off the entire amount. So
and
the
then
year after the apartment is for $25,000 or something. So does he have to pay zakat the next year, though it's technically not under his possession, but he will be the malik of it eventually after 5 years?
See, one, you have to consider whether it's personal or business, right?
Let's say it's personal.
If it's personal, then you're not looking at this. It's not zakatable to begin with, meaning $25,000, the apartment is worth $25,000 or more. That's irrelevant. Why? It's personal. Second thing is you're looking at potential expenses. Why? Until something transfers into your ownership, you're looking at potential expenses. So the fact that he's buying it slowly that's not going to be calculated in his zakat.
Okay, and another question.
An apartment is for personal, not calculated in his zakat either. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So another question is, if a person's mortgage payment for the year exceeds their cash holdings, they're not zakatable, right?
They're not liable to pay zakat, no. Again, mortgage meaning you're not including interest amount.
Okay. Inshallah. I think, let me see. We don't.
And Mona, if you want, what you can also do is you can give my contact. I'll give you my contact.
Yes, you can type it in the chat, Mona, please, if you want to.
I can give my contact.
Okay, we'll type it then, inshallah. 1 second.
And you can inshallah contact the brothers from the community, then can contact me for any additional questions or anything.
Yes, we would request our community, if you have any questions, inshallah, you can contact Mufti Daoud. Yes, Mufti Sahab, go ahead.
Yeah. You want me to just, should I put my number in?
I can put your email ID.
Yeah, just 1 second, inshallah. I'll send you a message and you can inshallah forward it to your community if you like.
Okay, Jazakallah. Okay, I'll do that. Jazakallah khair. And once again, Sheikh Mufti Sahab, thank you so much for giving us your precious time, and we took a lot of benefit from your wisdom and your knowledge, alhamdulillah. And we are looking forward, once this pandemic conditions are uplifted, to have you here in person, inshallah, so our community can benefit from you at large. Jazakallah khair once again, and keep remembering
for having me.
Du'as, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for having me.
Wa alaikum Sheikh. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.